Very good morning to everyone. Welcome to another in the webinar series leading through the revival by the Master in Holders. As always, I'd just like to give you a couple of dates for your diary. So the first date is open to absolutely everyone, and we've got the wonderful Kate Nichols. So the 20th of August at 11 a.m., 20th of August, 11 a.m., we have Kate Nichols just giving us a general update on all things government and COVID related. On the 10th of September at 2 o'clock, this is going to be the Master in Holders AGM, virtual AGM, open only to MIs. We have Kate also giving us another update for that, but please, you should have had a calling notice for all MIs. I'd also like to say all previous events and this event are going to be available on the Master in Holders YouTube channel. So please, if you want to catch up on this or any other event, go to Master in Holders on YouTube and catch up. So today we're very privileged to have Jane Sunley from Purple Cubed on with us today. I've seen some of the content. I know we're in for a really pertinent, informative session. As always with these, Jane's going to be talking for roughly about 20 minutes, and a lot of the value will be in Q&A afterwards. There is a Q&A button on the bottom of your screen, so please, when Jane's talking, feel free to ask questions, and then at the end we shall go through those. So Jane, thank you so much for coming on today. Look forward to hearing what you've got to say.
My pleasure, Danny. Thank you for having me. Right, we're just going to do a bit of screen magic, I think, first. Okay, well, morning everybody. Very nice to be here. This all came about because I wrote a blog called Redundancy with Kindness. I write lots of blogs, but maybe some of you know that. Just going to give you a tiny bit about my background, only because I know that lots of you won't know who I am. So my career started in hotel management, actually, strangely enough. And then I went off and worked within corporate catering for a bit, and always in an operational role, not as an HR person. So that's why we've made it very clear that this webinar is not going to be about legal aspects. This is going to be about human aspects. So over the years, by hook or by crook, I ended up in consultancy and started my own business 19 years ago. And out of that, I ended up doing a bit of software that went a bit mad and ended up being used in 55 countries. So I'm a sort of strange entrepreneur person, I suppose, but at the very heart of it, it's all about people. Most of the work that my company, Purple Cube, do is with hotels and with hospitality. We work with people like Firmdale, who have been a best employer in hospitality, and the Ritz and Valor and RT Hotels and so on, just to give you a bit of background. A lot of the work that we're doing at the moment is around helping people work out what their new normal is, which has been quite interesting because I know everybody is surely doing that, but there are a few other things to get in place first. And I think that's what we're going to talk about today, really. I suppose you've exhausted all the options for flexible furlough and job rotation and career breaks and sabbaticals and zero-hour contracts and all of those options that I know you've all been pulling out from everywhere to attempt to avoid the redundancy situation. And then, of course, now you're in it. And I think the thing about hotel people and caterers in general is we're all used to making people feel good and making people smile. So I think I'm going to stick my neck out and say it's harder for this industry probably than any other to actually start getting rid of their carefully nurtured and assembled teams. So I do feel your pain, and I know it must be super hard, which is why we're doing this today. If you want the statistics, studies say that when people have been made redundant, the incidence of depression and taking antidepressants goes up by 60%. which is pretty high. And it's not just about the people who are being made redundant, awful though that is. There's a whole thing around the survivors and how you help them, and also yourselves, because as we've just said, it's not really in your nature to be making all these people redundant and waving them goodbye. So I suppose the message is, if you have to do it as kindly as possible, and that's what we're going to cover today. So, doing the right thing. There have been a lot of stories in the press, and actually I get to hear quite a lot of things because our business has been going so long now that people talk to me, and I've heard some real horror stories. Okay, there are some people doing it well. There are some people who've done a lot of knee-jerk reaction stuff, who've kept it very legal, and of course it has to be legal, but sort of forgotten about the human aspect. And the upside of that is that, you know, there's a lot of people really hurting right now. So the strictly legal tends to kill the compassion. So the idea really is to keep it legal, but build up the softer, more human side. So let's have a look at why it matters. Well, I mean, all of those are really obvious things, but I think doing it with some thought can lessen the blow for everybody, including yourself. It will safeguard your reputation, and we all hopefully are going to have businesses to run in the future. People will think back to this time. If you think about how many companies dealt with the whole pandemic, you know, there were the ones that went right out there and said, right, we're all in this together, let's help everybody. And there were the people who panicked and didn't. And people will remember that. And I do think people will remember this life-changing event when they get made redundant and how it was done. And it's a lot about leaving the door open for people to return. You know, this industry for years, the reason I started my business was because of skill shortages and labour shortages in hospitality. And that was, you know, 20 years ago. And we fought all these years to build the reputation of our industry and bring all these people in. And then all of a sudden we're going to let them go. So the trick is, how do we get them back in time? So let's see if we can have a bit of a look at that. So first of all, let's just deal with communication, because that's the big one. In every single survey we ever do, when we're doing a diagnostic and we go and ask people, you know, how could you improve this business? Communication always comes at the top of that list. And it's because it's such a minefield. You know, to one person, communication is just saying hello. To somebody else, it's knowing exactly what's going on. So let's just think about communication in this time of redundancy. And I've done all my slides today in a 10 top tip way. So they are quite brief, but obviously we've got quite a long Q&A at the end. So, you know, keep your questions coming at the end, and let's see if we can deal with a bit more of the detail. It's very much about communication with care, and that means resisting the knee-jerk reaction and making sure that every communication you give is very carefully planned. And nobody's saying, oh, but it's so busy, we're trying to get up and running. But actually it's sort of false economy to rush this kind of stuff. So make sure that people hear it from you first. And I've had loads of stories of where, you know, a manager's shared it with another manager in confidence, and that manager's shared it with a team member in confidence, and all of a sudden everybody knows all about it, except that the information is not accurate. So it must come from, in my view, from the person at the top. And I don't mean that you have to pick the phone up and talk to every single person, because that might not be feasible, and it also might be quite intimidating for some people. But it is about getting a message, getting a video out there, making sure there's a place that people can go all the time to find out what's going on. So quelling the rumours, really. Make the message consistent. So if you don't know, say you don't know. There's a tendency with nice people to say, oh, well, this might happen, in a sort of optimistic way, but go away from the might happen. And this is a time to absolutely stick to the facts, even harsh and hard as they are. You can use preemptive statements by saying, look, you won't want to hear this, and it's hard to hear, but I'm just going to treat you like the adult you are and tell you the situation. And obviously being honest and transparent. This is not a time to start kind of covering it up in mystery, because trust will have been horribly damaged over the last few weeks and months. And now's the time to show the trustworthiness by being super honest. So also think about being in people's shoes. I do keep thinking about this in terms of customers. You know, when a customer comes into your establishment, you'll be thinking, if I was that person, what would make me feel good? If I was that person, what would give me a great experience? And you almost have to do the same now with your employee and say, if I was that person, how is that going to land? And I think that's easier if you're closer to people and you understand and you know them as individuals rather than a group of people. But particularly, you know, put yourself in the shoes and attempt to tailor the communications so that you can help them to understand exactly what's going on. Take time to explain the why. I know everybody would assume that you would know that business isn't great and you have to let people go. But I mean, you might even go as far as to showing them the numbers. I don't know how open you are about those things. But I think if you can say, look, we used to get this and now we earn that, and actually our overhead is this, it just doesn't work. In order to save the business, these are the steps we've taken, and make it very clear so that they understand the journey you've gone through, which you obviously are going through, but people don't know that. They don't know you've not just gone, oh, I don't like that person very much, so off they go. Key point here is about managers, so leaders at all levels, making sure they're equipped to have the conversations they need to have, and that they are super clear about what the messages are, even if you've got to rehearse them. I think it's very important, because one person giving false information can make it all go horribly wrong. And also have some kind of information hub, so preferably digitally, or maybe you've got a Facebook page or whatever, where people can go. So if they miss the communication or they don't understand something, they can go and read it or watch a video or whatever, and make sure you've got people on hand to have conversations and answer questions. Okay. The next one is about caring for your poorly redundant people. And there are 10 top tips around this. So I think this is now time to repay their hard work with your care. And there isn't enough of, you know, saying thank you for what you've done, you know, and it kills me to lose you, because it has to come from the heart. And I know you're all nice people, and I'm sure it would anyway. You know, it will come back, you know, the business will come back one day. And I think it is about leaving the door open and saying, look, you know, we'd love to have you back tomorrow. How can we keep in touch with you? Do you want to keep in touch with us? Would you like to come back? What are your aspirations? I think it's super important now to have exit interviews. And I've said this to a couple of people, and they're going, oh, but we're far too busy getting the business up and running, and we can't possibly sit down and have exit interviews with people. Well, if you don't have digital means to do that, you're going to have to do it in person somehow, because you need to find out exactly what their circumstances are, what they're going to go and do. Hopefully you'll be doing some work with them anyway around employability. I think there are going to be some links in the chat later, and also on the end of this video, where people can go to get free advice around CVs and interviewing, and there's lots of mentoring stuff going on and those kind of things at the moment. So I think it's just about, if you're going to talk to them anyway about helping them get their move forward and talking them through things like transferable skills, it's quite interesting. You know, I mentor quite a few young people, and when they say, oh, well, I'd actually like to go and do that now, but I haven't got any experience, and you start to look at their transferable skills and explain how the skill here could be used in something else, they find that a bit of a revelation. So you may need to have those kind of conversations, but certainly find out what they're going to do they want to come back, what will it look like. You know, there are loads of opportunities. If you can just keep people occupied for the next few months, you may well be able to bring them back. I think that's very important. Make it easy for them to return, I guess, is the key message. Okay, I'm going to call them the survivors, which sounds very dramatic, but you know, it's losing your colleagues is almost like going through a really bad breakup, or even almost a bereavement. You know, it gets people very emotionally, and I think in this industry we're all quite stoic and we battle on and we're super strong and all the rest of it. But as soon as the emphasis on well-being has come to the fore, as indeed it should have done, I think people have started to question this stoicness, and I think we have to not expect them to just keep calm and carry on. It's not going to be like that. So for the survivors, don't stop communicating with them. Keep telling them what's happening, weekly updates and so on and so forth. I'm sure you've probably been doing this while they've been furloughed. So just keep it happening, because as we know, the new normal is going to be very different. They're not going to know what things are and how it works and what happens. And, you know, talk to them about how they feel, because they're probably worried that they've lost a friend, but they're also worried that they've lost a shift member and how they're going to do that work when it all picks up again. So I think there is this whole communication, you know, keep going, keep doing it. Survivor guilt is very real. So I think it's important that they understand that the process you went through was a fair one, and you didn't just get rid of people that you weren't very keen on because they might have been their best friend or whatever. They'll be unsettled, they'll be worried that there's going to be a second and a third round of redundancies. And if there are, then I think you've got to be realistic and say, look, this is probably going to happen in whenever. However, we're going to keep you posted every week, so it doesn't come as yet another shock. And I think they're all adults, so treat them as such and say, if this happens, this will be okay. This is a time to get them really invested in what the numbers look like and how many customers you do and all the rest of it, and get them working out how they can contribute towards that and how they can promote your business a bit more. Okay. The other one thing I would mention actually with the survivor situation is to think about their own changing circumstances. So a lot of people are doing back to business reviews or check-ins or re-onboarding or whatever you want to call it. So find out where they're at and what's happened and what's changed in their circumstances, and then apply those bits of information to the way you go forward, rather than assuming that things are the same for them as they were before, because they're not. A lot of people have taken this opportunity to reevaluate their entire lifestyles. So I think now's a time to get informed. And for the survivors, give them the vision. And I think there's a mixture between super optimistic and going, everything's going to be fine, but there's a thing there that says, look, this is where we're going, this is how we're going to do it, and you will have all been working on this for months, so share it with them and making sure that there's a clear future ahead, rather than that we're all panicking. You might be doing that inside, but you don't need to tell anybody that. I thought this is a good time just to have a quick look at the change curve, and you've probably seen this a million times before, but on the left of the screen you'll see you've got stable and content, which is pre-pandemic, where we're all going along and doing very well and it was all lovely, we just had Christmas, make lots of money, lovely. And then of course you have the pandemic, so then you've got shock and denial. I remember saying to people, home, we'll only be at home for 2 weeks, then we'll all be back into the office. Well, that's how much I know. But we've all had that bit, we've all gone through the anger and frustration. Some people have gone into the depths of depression and despair, and that's pretty widespread at the moment, I can tell you. And then if you go right to the top right, you've got the achieve and move ahead bit, where confidence is restored, trust is restored. Everybody decides that, this is all very good and they can carry on and go forward very well. But you've got to acknowledge that you've got this bargaining and coping bit before you move up. So you're beginning to move up the curve. And I think this is probably where we are now. We're finding our way, we're working out the new normal, we're getting clarity, we're creating maybe a bit of excitement for the future. I was talking to Danny before this about how so many people have become more creative while we've all been away. So this is the period we're in, and this is where you need to put a bit of effort in, because otherwise it's easy to slip back if you don't do the right things. So I think we'll just sort of be aware that we have just been through the biggest change any of us probably will go through in our entire lives. And here we are trying to cope with it. So that might just kind of explain a little bit how that happens. So now I think we should talk about all of you, because, again, back on the stoic thing, I do think, certainly when I was in hotels, we all kind of used to martyr ourselves a little bit and, just take everything on the chin and protect everybody and make everything fine for our workforces. And actually, in those days, it was a long time since I did it, there was much more of a kind of parent-child relationship with our employees, whereas now, today's employees looking for an adult-to-adult relationship. They want you to tell them how it is. You want to give you feedback and take feedback. And, all of those conversations where people go, why doesn't my 21-year-old employee do the things that I did? Well, of course they're not going to, because the world's a different place. And I think now it's about, don't be a martyr, really. I know I've done it over the years, but I think there's a mixture between martyrdom and not caring. There's a point in the middle where it's like, yeah, I know it's tough for all of us. Actually, I'm here to make it as good as it possibly be for you. Because I think that phrase, it's tough at the top, has never been truer, to be honest. So what can we do for you? I think if you are feeling a bit shaky, more than normal, recognise the signs of when your own well-being is under threat. You know, there are lots of times when you can't sleep and you're feeling anxious and despair, but if it gets serious, you know, we really can't operate without proper sleep, without proper exercise, all of those things. So do recognise the sign. Balance other people's care with your own self-care, and find ways to keep yourself positive. And I know that's easier said than done, but there is a lot to be said for what I call talking therapy. And I don't mean you should all necessarily go into therapy, although that's never a bad thing. But, you know, have you got a coach? Have you got a mentor? Have you got somebody you can talk to? You know, it might be a family member, it might be a friend, it might be somebody you admire, whatever it is, but go and find someone you can talk through. And I know, you know, it's great, Master Inholders, you're all a support network for each other, which is amazing. And I understand that some people watch these that haven't got a support network. There are lots of people. I saw somebody do this the other day. A few people have been doing it actually, putting on their LinkedIn, you know, if I can help in any way, if I can support you. And that's really aimed at the redundant people. But I do think you should all be kind of supporting each other because we are all in it together. It's true. Put your energy into the right place, and that's the now. I do think put your energy into now. There's little point worrying about what's happened before. You know, there is some people are quite angry about what's happened still. We can't do anything about it, and there is absolutely no point sapping that energy. So, and don't put too much of it into the future. Of course, you've got a plan, but don't put the worrying part into the future because it's just not going to serve you. So I think there's a lot for mindfulness and being in the now, and that kind of thing. The point 3 on there about processing the change and recalibrate, you really, I cannot recommend enough that you could put some thinking time in right now. Just think about what's happened and what's changed and how that can be different. And it's in times like this when we're all trying to get up and running and everything's happening and all the rest of it, that the thinking time sort of falls off the bottom of the list. And this is the one time when you need it. So plan it in like a diary event. That's the way I do it. It's the only way it works really. Planning back on the back of the thinking, you know, just thinking to plan and listen to people and help them to work out the new normal with you. I think if you are involving people and getting them involved in something, even if you've not got a lot of business right now, then it does help you to feel that, you know, your own well-being is better when you're working with your group again. And on the other hand, if you've got 1 million people coming for a staycation, great, but get your people involved in how that's going to work rather than having to be the one that doles out all the advice all the time. There's a real shift over this pandemic from, you know, people not being trusted to have good opinions and do good work and not really being involved in things, to everybody getting involved in everything and people with their creativity coming to the fore. So I do think use that. Don't slip back to the way it was before. Think about what's the new team normal, because it will be very different. Self-belief, massive. Keep reminding yourselves how completely marvellous you are, because you wouldn't have got to where you are, and you will have been through crises before. And if you haven't, talk to someone who has. You know, I started this business the day before 9/11. That was not an excellent time to start a business. I'm just about to start another one now. So, you know, there are mad people in this world who have got self-belief and know that it will be okay. You know, that's another Danny phrase, you know, it'll be all right, and it will. So you just have to believe that, I think. And my last one really is be kind to yourself, because, you know, if you're not kind to yourself, it's hard to be kind to others. Do something you enjoy, go and read a book, go for a walk the dog, whatever it is, but make sure you've got some you time so that you can help yourself through and make yourself feel as well as you can. So just before we go to questions, I know there was a lot there and I've kind of rattled through it because I think it's more important that you talk rather than me. And you've got access to all of this afterwards, so you know the details are there. But if you only do one thing from today, I just think do resolve, going back to that kindness point, go back to being as kind as you can, as kind to yourself, as kind to everybody else. And it's a cost neutral way to improve your business, to improve everything really, and to improve the hand that you've been dealt. So be kind, good luck. I really hope every business here is booming 6 months from now. I'm going to hand you back to Danny, and let's see if you've got any questions. There you go.
Thank you so much for that. It's really, really, really interesting. So the Q&A is open. Jane, I just want to start with something that I thought you said at the beginning that's really interesting, which was about the strictly legal kills compassion, but if people are going to trip up on this process, if that's the right expression, you trip up by not following a process. So could you maybe expand at all on how we juggle that legal side?
Yeah. I think there's of course, do the process. I'm not saying don't do the legal stuff. I mean, you have to get that to the letter, obviously. But I do think there's a bit around getting your people together and saying, look, this is a legal process and that is to protect you, because we want to make sure it's fair. So we're going through the most fair process possibly. We're going to write you some letters that may sound quite formal, but we're doing that to protect you, because we want you to have the information in the right way, and then you can understand what to do. And then to explain to them, but this is coming from the heart, and we really don't want to do this. So I think there's the human bit. You don't have to write a kind of flowery legal letter, but I think there's a bit going, okay, I told you I was going to send you a letter and it was going to sound a bit formal, but me, our business, this isn't normally how we do things. It's just a case we want to protect everybody, so we're doing it like that. So just be really honest about it. I just think there are some people who've had a letter with no preamble at all, and they're used to having this, lovely, warm and engaging environment, and then they get this really tough letter through the post that they just don't know how to deal with. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that's great. And I've spoken to a few industry colleagues. One of the big bits of feedback that they've had during this process is, because we've become a Zoom or a Microsoft Teams world at the moment, have you got any advice around doing this process over Zoom versus in person? Because I think a lot of people have found Zoom is not personal. It's, you're missing that tiny little bit of body language and all of that good stuff. Have you got any advice around that?
Well, I think the first thing, if you can accommodate it, is to have a one-to-one with everybody. And okay, it's not the same on Zoom, but that's probably the way we have to do it. I mean, I would give people the option. Would you like to come in, if you can, would you like to come in and see me in a socially distanced way, and we can talk about what's happening, or we can do it on Zoom. So let people have that choice, and then, because then it's not imposed at all. And then I think there's also the bit about, not doing great group announcements about really serious things like this unless you have to. So, I mean, I did read about a general manager somewhere the other day. I know they didn't have loads of people who'd rung every single person personally. And I think that's nice. If you've got the relationship with people where they won't feel intimidated with you by having that conversation, then I think a call from a senior person saying, look, I want to explain this to you myself because I really care, is really powerful. But then if you're in a massive company and the CEO suddenly rings you and you're the kitchen porter or somebody, you might feel that you actually can't take this conversation in because you've never even spoken to this person. So I think it's all about individual circumstances and using common sense and being as kind as possible, as I've said many times, and just saying it the way it is, really.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you talk a lot about being honest. A lot of people, it depends on what market segment you're in, geographically where you're at, all of that good stuff. A lot of people, if they're being honest, it's pretty bleak. I mean, how honest should people be?
I think you've got to be honest in a positive way, really. So I do think there's a bit about, if it's pretty bleak, and you're doing everything you can to save your business, you probably shouldn't turn around and go, oh, the business is going to go. But I think, if your business isn't going to survive, then you've probably got to be honest about that. I mean, I don't think overshare, but don't be muddy, I think is what I'm saying. Be clear about what you're going to share and make that very transparent, because there's a lot of people kind of trying to flower it up at the moment. And, I was talking to somebody the other day, and she said, I don't know what we've been told. I don't understand, because, it's a bit like, look at, let's not get political, but, look, how much confusion have we had from the government? That's not made us feel good, has it? So I think if you can get your message clear, even if it's a bleak one, it does help because people want to feel in control. And I think, you know, throughout all of this, a lot of us have felt a bit out of control because it's like you can do this and you can't do that and all that stuff. So I do think it's about enabling people to have control. And yet, if it's bleak, I think you have to say that it's not great. But the thing is to say, and these are the 10 things we're doing, or these are the 5 things, or this is our plan. I think there's nothing worse than going, it's bleak, I'm not sure if we're going to survive. But if you go, look, it's bleak, however, we've got this really good plan and we want to get you involved in it and get your ideas as well. And here's where we've got to. And, you know, this is a time to do some of those things on Zoom where you do a few workshops and things and get people's ideas, because even if they tell you nothing that's new, they will feel that they're in this and they're helping to get you back onto road to recovery. So I think it's just about involvement and clarity.
Yeah, and that's really good advice about laying out the plan. We've got a question here. I'm going to read it out word for word. Our management apprentices who are HODs have been asked not to engage with people who are being made redundant at all, especially if they were on furlough before. What impact will this have on people, A, HODs, and B, the people made redundant?
Okay, it doesn't sound like a great approach, but you know, everybody's got their own business and their own work, and if that's the way they want to run it, that's up to them. But I do think if those are the people that others have relationships with and now they can't engage with them, that is not the way to support your people through redundancy and support your survivors. So, I mean, the answer is to train those managers to be able to have the right conversations and to have the clarity of message that when they are engaging, and if they get questions, they know what they can answer and they can't answer and what they should be saying. So I think that's a really tricky one. But yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of weird stuff going on at the moment, and that's why people like me are trying to just bring it back to sense.
That's why we're here.
Yeah.
Can I ask, there's another group of people in this, the part of the process is having a staff consultative committee and representatives. Would you have any advice? Are they treated any differently? Would you have any advice for people going through the process on that particular group of individuals?
Yeah, it's quite interesting this. I just did a piece of work just as we were going into lockdown, actually, with a synagogue, would you believe? And they had a staff committee, and they used to tell the staff committee things and then say, well, don't tell people this, and you can tell them that, but they weren't making it very clear. So what was happening, actually, the staff committee ended up being this massive rumour mill, not out of badness, just because they'd forgotten what they were supposed to say and they weren't. And there was a tendency to say, well, I'll tell you anyway, but don't tell anybody. And also they weren't clear because the person who was giving them the information was not clear about what they were saying. So I think if you have a staff committee, just make sure that everybody knows what the ground rules are and that what you tell them is super clear. And I wouldn't give them information that you wouldn't give to everybody right now, because it will get out, and that's how the rumours start. So I think consult them and ask them things that you might not ask everybody because they're representing. So make it sort of bottom up. But the top down thing, I think if you start telling the staff committee things and then say, but don't tell everybody because we're not ready yet, that's where all the sort of confusion starts, in my view.
Another really interesting question. Normally in a situation such as this, we may be able to support the team by offering them to review other opportunities within the group or elsewhere. What would you suggest in this time? And I suppose the implication is here that there aren't other opportunities to offer them.
I think there's tons of this on the internet, but first of all, look at all the industries that are recruiting at the moment, and there are many. I mean, there are some that people won't want to work in. I mean, look, care homes for a start, Amazon. There's loads of fruit picking and stuff going on. I mean, I've got a 24-year-old at home at the moment not working, and you know, there's sort of no stone unturned to try and find her something that she absolutely doesn't want to do, but is going to have to do it because she needs to go to work. So I do think if you as the employer can research that for them and say, look, there will be some resources on the end actually, but say, look, here are some comparable industries where you probably won't want to go and do a job there, but it's not going to be forever. Maybe you can just do that until you come back to us. And you do almost have to give them that information and help them, because in the same way that you'd find them a job outside of the group, you're going to have to find them a job outside in the world, really, just to keep people, you know, engaged and working. I think once they've gone, you can say to them, would you like me to keep in touch with you? And find a way, maybe do it digitally or whatever, to keep in touch with them after they've gone, so that you can keep checking in with them, they can keep checking in with you. You know, when people go on long-term leave and you check in and make sure they're okay and all of that, if you can accommodate that and put them in a job, you know, I don't know, hot picking, which they may not want to do, but at least they're doing something, they're earning some money. I mean, I know there is quite a large hotel group that was about to make a lot of redundancies, and what they're now going to do is they've offered people a 0 hours contract and helped them to find jobs in other industries. So they're still technically employed, albeit on a 0 hours contract, and then they're going to go and get a job in, I don't know, Tesco's or something, and then they'll keep you know, in touch with them that way, and then bring them back gradually. And I think that's quite a sound business decision, rather than just letting them all go out the door. And most of them have said, yeah, I'll go on a 0 hours contract for as long as it takes, and I'll go and do something else because I like my job here and I like you and I want to come back. So there are options.
Okay, there's one here. It's please signpost caterer.com. They've worked so hard on their deployment section, offering routes to jobs in other industries. I suppose let's wrap that up, because you've also in the chat is MJ, the wonderful MJ's toolkit. Could you just maybe talk about resources out there, such as caterer.com or
absolutely.
MJ's?
Caterer.com, agreed. Amazing job with the whole redeployment and support thing. Hospitality Action have obviously helplines for people being made redundant, and they are working tirelessly at the moment to support people. I must look on my list. There was a list of resources actually. That MJ's done it's a 4-part employability that helps with CVs, etc., and the kind of webinars I think that people can access for free. I've also signposted a legal expert, just in case anybody needs one, and also a website around redundancy for the processy bits. Umbrella have got a whole load of mentoring for their redundant apprentices. So there's stuff out there. Look, we're an industry full of nice people, aren't we? So I do think people want to help, and I think, you know, encourage people to ask. You know, don't anybody do this, because I've got loads, but, you know, people who say to me, oh, will you help me or will you mentor me? I normally would say yes, unless there was a really good reason not to, and I think we all would. So encourage people to ask for help, and, you know, people will pull it out and do that for them, I think.
And is will we be sending out? Have you got access to that resource, or should we send out?
No, I think I put it on the end of I didn't get to it actually, but on the end of my presentation it was there, and I think Petra's going to make sure that everybody gets that information. There are a whole load of links to things. There's some links to our own stuff. We've got a wellbeing tool out at the moment that is very competitively priced, but really we made it very cheap right now because it's just supporting everybody. We've got on the Purple Cube website, there's loads of blogs and things about all of this stuff, and there's also a back to business check-in that just gives a bit of structure around that people can use. So there's lots of links. We'll make sure they all go out, yeah, for sure.
Okay, and we've got a message from Dr. Hilary Cook saying, put me on a list. I'm happy to give my time for free to coach and support.
Thank you, Hilary.
But room for more. So if we can add Hilary on there, that'd be fantastic. It would be really interesting. You talked a lot about, you know, looking after yourself, and I know from very personal experience, you know, this is a hugely challenging, traumatic, difficult time for the individuals, and you've been through a list of how you can look after yourself. But if you, how do you genuinely do? I mean, it's kind of, most people in the unfortunate position of doing this know all about what they should be doing to look after themselves, but how do you change your mindset to one of acceptance or of having to do it? Or is that just not, have you just not worth thinking about?
I think it's overwhelming because all the advice is exercise, do yoga, do meditation, stop drinking, do that. There's tons of it. And I think if you just start by picking one thing that you could probably do, you could probably live with, and just start doing it, because I don't know what the numbers are anymore. It used to be it took 3 weeks to break a habit. We're all in a time of change, and we've been in a time of negative change. And I think if you can bring about some positive change in yourself, it will make you feel more in control. So as an example, I got my husband doing yoga when he was going through a stressful time, not now, but he's retired now, lucky him, missed all this. But, you know, when he was going through that, I got him doing yoga, and he's like, I don't really do yoga. What do I want to do that for? And he's like a complete yoga nut now. And that dealt with his stress and all his anxiety and all that stuff from, you know, being a CEO of a big business. So I just think find one thing, and if that one doesn't work, find something else, because all the advice in the world, like don't drink a bottle of red wine a night, you know, if that's what gets you through, then that's what you have to do, I suppose. But, you know, it's difficult. But there's a sort of, you know, alcohol doesn't help anxiety at all. So there's a bit about just maybe pulling back on some of those things, because it just helps you to feel a bit better. But yeah, it's do something that you like doing, really, and make that time. That's what I mean about don't be a martyr. We all go, right, my own well-being, it doesn't matter because it's all about the business and it's all about my investors and it's all about my people. And then lo and behold, you know, you're exhausted because you're back doing 90 hours a week and you've done nothing for yourself. And it just doesn't serve people well, I don't think.
Yeah. There's been a couple more offers of help and information. The Institute of Hospitality offers a mentoring service too. So that's from Alistair Sandel. I know they do a great job on mentoring. If we can add that to the list. And Harry Murray has kindly offered to his support free of charge as well. So thank you, Alistair and Harry. I don't want to be depressing, but you did talk about if there is a second or third round here, if there's any change, is it the same approach if we're unlucky enough as an industry to have to go through this again? Would you be giving the same advice, or are there any tweaks you would suggest?
I think if I don't give the same advice, the other advice is, oh well, let's all give up and bury our heads, you know, and maybe we sometimes feel like doing that, but I think it's back to that self-belief bit. You know, if you believe in your business and in the world and in people and all the rest of it, I just think it's easier said than done, but just grit your teeth and get on with it. You know, I mean, I'm a small business, and, you know, my income went like everybody else's, and, you know, what can you do? So second wave, third wave, I mean, how much can they batter us? But we've all been battered many times over the years, haven't we? And it's just about sharing those stories. I saw David Morgan Hewitt had said about kind of buddying up with others. I think the strength in numbers here, and even if you know, go outside and scream, I mean, whatever it takes to keep positive as possible and just to keep a bit of control, really. And I do think there's a power if we all kind of believe it's not going to happen, we'll somehow get through, but let's see.
Jane, that's probably the perfect note of optimism to
no
wrap
choice.
up. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. It's been really interesting. And I'm going to reiterate, this is going to be, everybody who registered is going to get sent a recording of this. Jane's going to add links to the end of it. So thank you all so much for listening, Jane. Appreciate it. And fingers crossed, optimism, no second wave, no second rounds, nothing other than positiveness.
Absolutely.
Thank you all very much.
Good luck, everybody. That's all I can say. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. Thank you.